From May 23rd to August 26, 2019, the British Museum held a special Japanese comic or manga exhibition. It's a celebration of Japanese history and ties together the country's rich art traditions with an international pop culture sensation. But I'm not here to actually talk about the museum exhibit, which I can't even attend since I live in Texas, but a particular response to it. See, on May 21st, The Guardian published a 2-star review by Jonathan Jones, an art critic who in 2015 criticized the books of Terry Pratchett as, quote, not worth the time to read, end quote. When he was called out for his commentary because he never read the books, he both backtracked and doubled down, admitting that Pratchett's books are witty and entertaining, but that the characters and prose fell short of being worthy of literary fiction, whatever that means. I bring this up not to discredit Jones's article offhand, but hopefully to provide a frame of reference from where he's coming from. Mainly an appreciation for quality popular media that is subservient to high culture. You can see this throughout his review, and Jones even begins the article with an appreciation of Japanese art from the 1880s, but I feel that the following 2 paragraphs best illustrate his argument.
I've rarely seen a show whose catalog is so much more interesting than the display in the gallery. Not only are the drawings in the book dirtier, but there are far more illustrations of classic Japanese art. Surely this is what the exhibition should have been. It should have used the contemporary allure of manga to draw us into a huge survey of Japan's art history. Instead, it expects us to seriously accept that manga's big-eyed heroes and their, on this evidence, sentimental adventures are themselves as worthy of attention as a work by Hokusai. What's next, Rembrandt meets Stennis the Menace? I'm not knocking manga or its fans, but what has it got to do with the British Museum? We go there to have our eyes opened to artistic and historical wonders, not to get more of what's on offer everywhere, 24/7. This exhibition is a tragicomic abandonment of a great museum's purpose.
And on the surface, that seems reasonable. Popular entertainment like Takehiko Inoue's Vagabond or Hikaru Nakamura's Saint Young Men shouldn't be taken as seriously as, but instead used as a gateway for, classical art like Tsukioka Yoshitoshi's 100 Aspects of the Moon or Biographies of Modern Men. But that still begs the question, why? Why shouldn't the latest TV shows, comics, and movies be taken as seriously as older painting, plays, and novels? Why should the popular media of today merely act as a gateway to the classics of yesterday? Why can't the past instead be used as a launching point to appreciate the stories people are telling now? Honestly, there's no good reason to be so restrictive. It's not that the distinction between high and low culture is arbitrary or some tool of social control, but more that if you want to use mass media as a stepping stone towards the classics, then you have to treat it with the same seriousness you usually reserve for high art. Or at least that's one of the many things that the late Richard Keller Simon argues in his book Trash Culture, Popular Culture in the Great Tradition. Simon was the director of humanities and English professor at Cal Poly with decades of experience trying to get his students engaged with classic literature. While many of his colleagues lamented no longer being able to use the Bible as a common reference point for teaching the classics, and placed the blame squarely on trash television and movies, Simon found that common reference points still existed amongst his students, they just changed as new generations grew up exposed to new media. He managed some success using trash media like Cosmopolitan as a bridge towards more literary work like Jane Austen novels, but still hit a couple of snares. In particular, Simon discovered that framing Jane Austen's work as something that should be taken more seriously than Cosmopolitan meant that students became intimidated and disengaged even though they expertly applied their analysis towards a women's fashion magazine, and were merely being asked with applying what they've learned towards Pride and Prejudice with a little extra care. It was a particularly tough challenge to overcome until Simon devised a counterintuitive solution. Instead of using Cosmo to build a bridge by which his students would come to appreciate Jane Austen, he used Jane Austen to build a foundation by which his students would understand Cosmo. That may seem preposterous at first, but it works for a very simple reason. Many of the classic works of art cover the same themes and pose the same questions as even the most disposable mass media. That's also why many of the classics stand the test of time. Their explorations continue to resonate with audiences and stand as inspirations worth striving towards. But when we present pop culture as mere training wheels for serious analysis of serious work by serious scholars, we lock high culture inside an ivory tower inaccessible to all but the most wizardly of academics. By using literature like Beowulf as a framework to understand films like Star Wars, we not only build a bridge between the two works, but also reinforce the former's legacy. And that's the strategy the British Museum took in its manga exhibit, which is well within its mission and directly achieves its goal of opening our eyes to artistic and historical wonders. Does this mean anything goes and any piece of Renaissance art can be used to appreciate any random Netflix original? No. And I agree with Jones that it would be inappropriate to piece Dennis the Menace together with Rembrandt. But that doesn't mean Rembrandt stands unparalleled in his work. An alien genius so far above every other artist, his work transcends our ability to understand existence, and as a result, is utterly irrelevant to anyone alive today. Rembrandt was just a very talented 17th century Dutch painter who explored religious and mythological themes in his work. Many of his biblical depictions take heavy influence from his personal observations of the Dutch Jewish community, and his paintings of Prodigal Son in a Tavern and Aristotle with a bust of Homer could easily be relabeled Portrait of a Dutch Aristocrat at Home, and you'd be much more accurate at describing the subject matter. But eschewing historical accuracy in favor of restaging history in the Bible in a more contemporary setting make Rembrandt's art resonate beyond the technical skill on display. In a similar vein, Hikaru Nakamura's Saint Young Men transforms Christ and Buddha into modern Japanese roommates living in a suburb of Tokyo. Their daily adventures serve as the backdrop by which we come to understand the people these two religious titans were and have expected them to be. Like Rembrandt before her, Nakamura succeeds in pulling Christ and Buddha through time and religious tradition into a modern context that even the non-religious can appreciate. And it's for that reason the British Museum chooses to celebrate her work. So to finally address the question in this video's clickbait thumbnail, yes. Manga is trash culture, because high culture is trash culture, and trash culture matters more than we could possibly imagine. Thanks for watching.